At my sister's wedding, she stood up in front of everyone and humiliated me. But what she didn't expect was her groom stepping in and silencing the entire room. My name is Jessica, and I'm about to tell you how that moment changed everything. Stay with me until the end, and if this story moves you, I'd love for you to show some support by subscribing, liking, and sharing. It means more than you think. Growing up, I was always known as the quiet one, the one who blended into the background while my sister, Christina, lit up every room she entered. To everyone else, she was the golden child, the perfect daughter, the star of the family. My parents praised her endlessly, her looks, her charm, even when she barely tried. Me? I was the one they compared her to. If Christina was the pretty one, I was just plain Jessica. If she was the confident one, I was the shy shadow following behind. That was the story of our childhood, and honestly, I thought I had made peace with it. Still, no matter how much it hurt, I always supported her. Birthdays, school events, college graduations, I clapped for her louder than anyone. I told myself, she's my sister. Her shine doesn't take anything away from me. And when she announced her engagement, I felt nothing but happiness. At least that's what I wanted to believe. Christina's fiance, Mark, seemed like the kind of guy any woman would be lucky to marry. He was respectful, polite, and surprisingly humble for someone who came from money. He treated my parents with kindness, and even though Christina sometimes made cutting jokes at my expense, Mark always looked uncomfortable when she did. A small part of me hoped marriage would soften her, make her realize that tearing me down wasn't necessary anymore. When Christina asked me to be her maid of honor, I hesitated for a second. Not because I didn't want to be there for her, but because I wondered if she really wanted me by her side, or if it was just to keep up appearances. Still, I accepted. I told myself it was an opportunity to prove I could handle it with grace, even if she used the spotlight to remind me of my place. As the big day approached, I focused on helping her. I ironed out last-minute details, kept the bridesmaids calm, and smiled through every little jab Christina made during. She would laugh about how I had no idea what a real wedding should look like, or how I'd probably still be single in my 40s. I brushed it off. I thought, it's her stress talking. Weddings make people act out. By the morning of the wedding, I pushed my nerves aside. The Virginia venue looked like something out of a fairy tale. White flowers, flowing fabric, the kind of setup you only see in magazines. I stood there in my maid of honor dress, determined to support my sister no matter what. What I didn't know was that she had already planned a moment to tear me down in front of everyone I cared about. But before she could have the last word, someone else would step in, and it wasn't me. Christina had always outshined me. From the time we were kids, it felt like everything she touched turned to gold. She was the one who caught everyone's eye, who knew how to smile at the right time and say the right thing. Meanwhile, I was the one sitting in the corner with a book, hoping nobody noticed me. My parents didn't hide their feelings either. They would say things like, "Christina is our pretty girl," and then glance at me with a faint smile, adding, "Jessica is, well, she's dependable." It stung every single time. They didn't mean to be cruel, or maybe they did. But either way, I grew up learning that my value was measured against my sister's shine, and I always came up short. I learned to focus on the things I could control. While Christina relied on her charm, I poured myself into my studies, into building a career, into making something of myself outside of my family's shadow. I wasn't the girl with the perfect curls or the dazzling smile, but I was the one who stayed late at work, who got promoted, who saved up to buy her own apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For a while, that was enough to give me peace. When Christina introduced us to Mark, I was skeptical at first. He was handsome, well off, and came from a family with influence. Everything about him screamed too perfect. But then he spoke, and his kindness caught me off guard. He wasn't arrogant, he wasn't dismissive, he actually listened. He treated me like I mattered, something I wasn't used to in my family. That gave me hope. Maybe this marriage would be different. Maybe with him by her side, Christina would stop feeling the need to put me down. So when she asked me to be her maid of honor, I wanted to believe it was genuine. But deep down, I knew better. It didn't feel like an honor. It felt like an obligation, something she could check off her list to make the wedding look picture perfect. Still, I agreed. I thought maybe, just maybe, being part of her big day would finally bridge the gap between us. But the little jabs started almost immediately. During dress shopping, she laughed at my taste, whispering to the bridesmaids that I didn't know what real style looked like. While planning the rehearsal dinner, she made a joke about how I didn't need a +1 since I never had anyone serious anyway. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, pretending it didn't hurt, but inside I felt the same sting I'd carried since childhood. The closer we got to the wedding, the more I realized this wasn't about celebrating love. It was about Christina being the star of the show. And me? I was just another prop in her story. The rehearsal dinner should have been a night filled with laughter, love, and anticipation. Everyone was gathered in the decorated hall, the tables lined with flowers, soft music playing in the background. I wore a simple blue dress I had chosen carefully, something I thought was elegant without drawing too much attention. But the moment Christina saw me, her smirk told me it wouldn't go unnoticed. She leaned toward the bridesmaids at our table, her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Jessica, that dress is interesting," she said with a fake smile. "Kind of like something from a school dance, don't you think?" The bridesmaids chuckled, some trying to hide it behind their glasses of wine. I felt my cheeks burn, but I forced myself to smile, pretending it didn't bother me. I didn't want to make a scene. It was her night, after all. Later, as the toasts began, Christina found another opportunity to get her jab in. She raised her glass and said with exaggerated sweetness, "Here's to Mark and me, and to my maid of honor, who, by the way, has never had a serious boyfriend, but is always ready to give relationship advice." The table erupted in laughter, the kind that cuts deeper than silence. My throat tightened, but I laughed along, because what else could I do? My parents smiled awkwardly, not stepping in, not defending me. It was like I was 12 years old again, being mocked in front of the family. I kept my head down, trying to focus on my food, willing the night to pass without further humiliation. But then I noticed Mark watching me. His expression wasn't like the others. He wasn't amused. His brow furrowed slightly, and his lips pressed into a thin line. Later, when everyone was mingling and Christina was busy showing off her ring, he came over to me quietly. "You don't deserve that," he said in a low voice, his eyes meeting mine with sincerity. I froze, not knowing how to respond. For a second, I felt exposed, like he could see the hurt I was trying so hard to hide. All I managed to say was, "It's fine. She's just stressed." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't the truth. Christina wasn't stressed. This was who she had always been with me. Mark looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't push. He just gave me a small, reassuring nod before walking back to his seat. That simple gesture stayed with me longer than Christina's insults. For the first time, I felt like someone saw the cracks I tried to cover, someone who understood that beneath my smile, I was hurting. As the evening ended, everyone laughed and posed for pictures, but the unease lingered in my chest. Something about Christina's need to embarrass me felt sharper than usual, as if she had plans for more. I went home that night with a pit in my stomach, sensing the wedding day would not be the fairy tale event I had hoped for. The morning of the wedding arrived with a calm Virginia breeze, the kind that carried the faint scent of blooming flowers from the garden surrounding the venue. The estate where the ceremony was being held looked like something out of a magazine. Rows of white chairs lined the grassy aisle, delicate ribbons tied to each one, swaying gently in the wind. Roses in shades of ivory and blush framed the arch where Christina and Mark would soon exchange vows. Guests dressed in their finest filled the space, their chatter softening as the string quartet began to play. I stood near the back, smoothing down my dress, trying to calm my nerves. As maid of honor, I wanted everything to go perfectly. No matter how Christina had treated me leading up to this day, I told myself it didn't matter. This was her wedding. She deserved to feel special, and if my role was to stay in the background and help make that happen, then I was ready to do it. When it was time to walk down the aisle, my legs felt heavier than they should have. All eyes turned as I began my slow steps. Halfway down, the heel of my shoe caught slightly in the grass, causing me to stumble. My heart jumped, but I caught myself quickly, forcing a smile as if nothing had happened. That's when I saw her, Christina. She was standing at the end of the aisle, radiant in her white gown, but her lips curved into a smirk, sharp and knowing. It wasn't the smile of a bride overwhelmed with joy. It was the smile of a sister who had been waiting for me to slip. I looked away, focusing on the arch ahead, determined not to let her see how much it rattled me. Once I reached the front, I took my place, trying to steady my breathing. The ceremony began, and to my surprise, everything flowed seamlessly. The officiant's words were warm, the vows heartfelt. Guests dabbed at their eyes with tissues as Christina and Mark exchanged promises of forever. Even I felt my heart soften, watching Mark speak with such sincerity. For a moment, I let myself believe this day might end without another wound carved into me. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a golden glow over the couple as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers echoing across the lawn. I clapped along, smiling, telling myself that whatever tension existed between Christina and me didn't matter right now. This was her moment, and she looked every bit the perfect bride she had always dreamed of being. As the ceremony closed and guests began to make their way toward the reception hall, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe I had been wrong to worry. Maybe the rehearsal dinner had just been a fluke, a moment of thoughtless cruelty that wouldn't repeat itself. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But deep down, a small voice whispered that the day wasn't done testing me. The real storm was still waiting, just beyond the open doors of the reception. The reception hall glowed with golden light, chandeliers sparkling above as music floated through the air. The space had been transformed into something out of a dream. Round tables draped in white linen, crystal glasses catching the glow of candles, flowers spilling out of tall vases in every corner. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and the energy in the room was bright, almost intoxicating. People danced as the band played, children darted between tables, and waiters glided past with trays of champagne. I sat at the head table, trying to take it all in, reminding myself to stay calm. Despite everything leading up to this day, I wanted the evening to go smoothly. When it was my turn to give the maid of honor speech, I stood with shaky hands, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked out at the sea of faces, all watching me, and began to speak. My voice wavered at first, but I steadied myself. I spoke about Christina, about how I remembered her as a little girl playing dress-up, how I admired her confidence even when I struggled to find my own. I spoke about Mark, about how he had brought a calmness into her life, how his kindness balanced her fire. My words came from the heart, every sentence meant to honor them both. As I spoke, I could hear small sniffles from guests, see smiles and nods of approval. When I finished, there was a round of applause that seemed to ripple through the room. For a moment, warmth filled my chest. Maybe this was it, the small bridge between Christina and me, the moment where she would finally see that I had always supported her, even when she made it difficult. But when I turned to her, she wasn't smiling with gratitude. She was smirking, her eyes glinting with something sharp. She clapped slowly, almost mockingly, and leaned over to give me the faintest of thanks that felt more like dismissal than appreciation. The applause around us faded, but the sting of her expression lingered. Before I could even sit down, Christina rose from her chair and reached for the microphone. "Okay, everyone," she said brightly, her voice carrying across the room. "My maid of honor gave such a sweet speech, but I think I should return the favor. I have something fun to share." Her tone was light, playful, but the way her eyes flicked toward me made my stomach tighten. Guests cheered, expecting another round of laughter, maybe a funny story from childhood. But inside, a cold dread settled in me. I knew that look. I had seen it 1,000 times growing up. The look Christina wore right before she found a way to make me the punchline. The microphone squealed slightly as she adjusted it, her smile widening. My palms grew clammy, and I tried to steady my breathing, but a voice inside me whispered what I didn't want to believe. This wasn't going to be a sweet story. This was going to hurt. Christina held the microphone like it was her crown, her eyes glittering as she scanned the room. "So," she began with a laugh, "since my sweet sister gave me such a heartfelt speech, I thought I'd share a little something about her too." The crowd chuckled, leaning in, expecting something lighthearted. My stomach sank. I knew that tone too well. She started with a story from when we were kids, twisting it into something humiliating. "Jessica used to dress up in Mom's old clothes and pretend she was walking down an aisle," she said, pausing for effect. "Except she didn't have anyone to pretend with, just her stuffed animals. Always the lonely one." Laughter erupted across the tables. My hands tightened around my napkin, my face burning hot. Before I could even catch my breath, she went on. Growing up, Jessica was always so jealous of me. She hated when people called me the pretty one, but what could I do? I didn't make the rules." She shrugged dramatically, making the crowd laugh again. A few guests shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable, but Christina didn't stop. "She was never quite good enough at anything," she continued, her smile sharp as glass. "Not in school, not in sports, not even socially. I mean, you all see it, right? She's still single. Honestly, I think she might be single forever. Poor thing can't keep a boyfriend for more than a couple months." The laughter was quieter this time, mixed with awkward glances, but the damage was done. My throat ached, my chest heavy as though someone had placed a stone inside it. I felt every pair of eyes on me, some pitying, some entertained. The sound of her voice blurred into the buzzing in my ears. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor so no one could see me sitting there, red-faced and small. And then she delivered the final blow, tilting her head with mock sympathy. "But hey," she said, her smile widening, "maybe one day she'll find someone who pities her enough to stick around." The laughter stopped. The entire room went quiet. The words hung in the air, heavier than any insult she'd thrown before. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall, my body rigid as I sat there, forcing myself not to break down in front of everyone. For once, there was no chuckle, no forced applause, just silence. A suffocating, cutting silence. Guests shifted uncomfortably, no one quite sure how to react. Christina's smirk faltered for a moment as she looked around, realizing her joke hadn't landed the way she thought it would. I sat frozen, my nails digging into my palms, fighting the urge to run. Humiliation wrapped itself around me like a heavy cloak, and all I could think was how badly I wanted the night to end. But what happened next wasn't something I could have imagined. Mark pushed his chair back, so suddenly it screeched against the polished floor. Every head turned as he strode toward Christina, his jaw set, his expression darker than I had ever seen. Before she could even bask in the silence she thought she owned, he reached out and took the microphone from her hand. His voice cut through the heavy air with sharp precision. "That's enough." The words were simple, but the tone behind them froze the room. Conversations died, forks hovered midair, and every pair of eyes locked on. Christina blinked in surprise, forcing a nervous laugh. "Mark, I was just joking." "No," he interrupted firmly. "You weren't joking. That wasn't funny, Christina. That was cruel. And I'm not going to let you stand here on what's supposed to be our wedding day and tear your own sister down like that." The silence deepened, broken only by a few whispers spreading quickly through the crowd. Christina's smile faltered, her knuckles tightening around the edge of the tablecloth. Mark turned his gaze to me. His voice softened, but the firmness remained. "Jessica, you don't deserve that. You never have. I've seen the way she talks to you, the way she tries to make you feel small. I kept hoping marriage would change her, that she'd grow out of it, but tonight, she proved me wrong." My heart hammered in my chest. No one had ever defended me like that. Not in front of my family, not in front of Christina. I wanted to speak, but my throat felt locked shut. Then Mark turned back to the guests, holding the microphone steady. "Since Christina seems to enjoy putting on a show, I think it's time I share something too. Something she's been keeping from all of you." A ripple of unease swept through the room. Christina's face drained of color. "Mark," she hissed, "don't you dare." He didn't flinch. His voice carried clearly across the hall. "Christina has been cheating on me. With my best man, Derek." The words exploded like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the air. Chairs scraped as people twisted to look at Derek, who sat frozen, staring down at his plate as if it could swallow him whole. Murmurs rippled across the room, disbelief and shock mixing with the faint sound of someone dropping their glass. Christina's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Her eyes darted toward Derek, desperate for him to deny it, but he wouldn't even look at her. Mark's voice was steady, calm in the way only truth could be. "I was willing to stand here today and give her a chance, but after what she just did to her own sister, I'm done protecting her. Everyone here deserves to know who she really is." The room had gone from laughter to absolute chaos in minutes, and as Christina stood trembling, her perfect wedding unraveling before her eyes, I sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what had just happened. The whispers began as a low murmur, but within seconds, the banquet hall was alive with gasps, shocked voices, and the clatter of silverware as people leaned across tables to confirm what they'd just heard. "Cheating. With the best man." The words spread like wildfire, and all eyes turned toward Christina. Her face drained of color, the confident smirk she'd worn just moments ago vanishing. "That's not true," she stammered, her voice trembling as she looked desperately at Derek. "Tell them, Derek. Say it's not true." But Derek didn't meet her eyes. His head hung low, shoulders slumped, his hands fidgeting nervously with the cufflinks Christina had gifted. The silence from him spoke louder than any denial could. Guests exchanged horrified glances, and the whispers grew into outright judgment. Mark's voice cut through the noise. "I won't marry a liar," he declared, his tone steady, filled with both anger and finality. "This wedding is over." The words struck like a thunderclap. The room froze, even the band in the corner setting down their instruments. Christina's mouth opened, but no words came out, just a strangled breath. Mark turned then, his gaze softening as he found Jessica in the crowd. "And to you, Jessica," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the tension, "I am deeply sorry. You never deserved the way you were treated, especially not today." Jessica felt her throat tighten. After years of biting her tongue, of swallowing insults and pretending her sister's cruelty didn't sting, someone had finally stood up for her, on Christina's own stage. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears, and for once, she didn't feel small. Her parents, seated at the front, scrambled to salvage the wreck. Her mother rose quickly, forcing a shaky laugh. "Mark, you're just upset. Christina is your bride. Don't let a little misunderstanding ruin this beautiful day." "Misunderstanding?" Mark snapped, his voice echoing in the hall. "This isn't a slip of the tongue or a mistake in judgment. This is betrayal. And it didn't just happen today. It's been happening behind my back for months." Gasps rippled again through the guests. A few stood, shaking their heads, grabbing coats and purses. The wedding no longer felt like a celebration, but a spectacle unraveling in real time. Jessica's father tried next, raising a hand as if to calm things. "Mark, think about what you're saying. We can talk this through." But already, half the guests were filing out, disgust written plainly on their faces. The photographers lowered their cameras, unsure whether to keep shooting or to respect the disaster unfolding. Christina, her face blotchy with shame, spun toward Jessica. "You did this," she hissed, her voice sharp with fury. "You've always wanted to ruin me." Jessica didn't answer. She didn't need to. Christina's own actions had done the ruining. With a sharp cry, Christina shoved past the nearest guest and stormed out of the hall, her expensive gown dragging across the floor like a fallen crown. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her, sealing her humiliation. The hall was left in stunned silence, broken only by the shuffling feet of guests who couldn't leave fast enough. For the first time in years, Jessica wasn't the one standing in shame. Her sister was. And this time, the whole world had seen it. When the dust settled after that disastrous wedding, the aftermath was as messy as you'd imagine. Christina, stripped of her shining bride status, had no choice but to move back into our parents' house. She was furious, not at herself for betraying Mark, but at me. Somehow, in her twisted reasoning, it was all my fault. I had stolen the spotlight at her wedding. I had ruined her perfect day. Never mind that she had been cheating with Mark's best man. Christina had never been one to accept responsibility. Our parents didn't make it easier. They were quick to blame me as well. My mother said if I had just kept quiet and not attracted attention during the wedding, things wouldn't have spiraled. My father muttered about me being a trouble magnet. It stung. I had been humiliated in front of hundreds of people, yet somehow I was still painted as the villain in my own family. But here's the thing. Truth has a way of seeping into every corner, no matter how much people try to bury it. Our extended relatives had witnessed the whole thing. They saw Christina's cruel speech, Mark's anger, Derek's shameful silence. Slowly, phone calls and messages started pouring in, not to support Christina, but to tell me I had done nothing wrong. Aunts, uncles, cousins. All of them voiced their disgust at Christina's behavior and told me I deserved better than the treatment I'd endured all my life. For once, I wasn't alone. Mark, true to his word, didn't let Christina manipulate him into forgiving her. Within weeks, he filed for an annulment, cutting ties completely. He even fired Derek from his company, refusing to tolerate betrayal in any form. Watching Christina's perfect little world crumble around her should have satisfied me, but it left me with something deeper, relief. For the first time, I wasn't the only one who could see her true nature. What surprised me most was Mark's kindness after it all. He reached out, not in pity, but in genuine concern. He checked on me, asked how I was coping, even apologized again for everything I had endured that night. Slowly, we began to talk more. At first, it was casual, just two people who had survived the same storm. But over time, it grew into something else. He listened to me in ways no one else ever had. For once, I felt seen, not as Christina's awkward sister, not as someone to mock or dismiss, but as myself. When Mark finally asked if I'd like to go out for dinner, not as friends, but something more, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving Christina wrong. It was about finally being valued, appreciated, and treated with the respect I had always longed for. And as strange as it sounds, out of the wreckage of that wedding, I found something I never expected, my own happiness. Christina's downfall was almost poetic. In the weeks that followed, her once perfect reputation unraveled piece by piece. Friends who used to gather around her, eager to bask in her presence, began to slip away. Some stopped answering her calls, others avoided her in public. The whispers that had started at her wedding grew into a storm. Everywhere she went, she could feel eyes on her, hear muffled laughter, and catch the sting of judgment in people's voices. For someone who had always thrived on admiration, it was unbearable. Jessica, on the other hand, found herself growing stronger. For the first time in years, she wasn't shrinking under Christina's shadow. The humiliation that had once been aimed at her had flipped around, and she realized she didn't have to carry the burden of her family's favoritism anymore. It was liberating. She could breathe without constantly fearing comparison. She could speak without worrying her words would be twisted against her. Slowly, confidence blossomed where insecurity once lived. Mark, too, became a surprising part of her healing. After ending things with Christina, he reached out to Jessica, not out of pity, but out of genuine respect. "You didn't deserve any of that," he told her over coffee one afternoon, his voice steady but warm. "The truth is, you were the only honest one in the room that day." Their friendship began there, with long talks that drifted from painful confessions to shared laughter. They weren't rushing into anything, but the foundation they built was solid: mutual respect, trust, and the kind of honesty Christina had never been able to give. Jessica noticed the difference immediately. With Mark, she didn't feel like she had to perform, didn't feel like she was fighting for space. He saw her for who she was, not as Christina's little sister, not as the family's afterthought, but as Jessica, the woman who had endured humiliation and still stood tall. Slowly, their bond deepened into something more tender. And for once, Jessica didn't doubt it. Looking back, Jessica couldn't help but reflect on how strangely things had turned. Christina had orchestrated everything to tear her down in public, to make her feel small, worthless, and ridiculed. But in trying so hard to ruin her, Christina had only revealed her own betrayal for the world to see. Jessica hadn't needed to plot revenge, hadn't needed to scream or fight. Christina's cruelty had undone itself. Jessica's final reflection was simple, but it carried the weight of everything she had endured. She tried to ruin me at her wedding, but in the end, she destroyed herself. Those words weren't said with anger anymore, but with a quiet strength. Jessica had moved on. Christina's life was still entangled in bitterness and social ruin, while Jessica's was finally opening into something bright and real. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest revenge of all. Do you believe Jessica made the right choice by stepping away from her family's toxic favoritism? Or should she have tried harder to mend things with Christina? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear your perspective. And if stories like this keep you hooked, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.